Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast. And I'm pretty excited today because I've got a very dear friend and somebody I admire very much coming in to participate and have a conversation with me through the podcast, John Salter. And the irony of it is that we both have the first name, and my mum's maiden name was Salter. So we're sort of unofficially brothers, I guess. A little bit about John. He's a really experienced occupational health and safety leader. He's worked in a wide range of safety disciplines spanning 35 years. That makes you a really old guy, right, John? He's worked in senior safety management roles in tier 1 companies, such as John Holland and Thiess, and also at Telstra, Metro Trains, Victrac, and Transurban, and others. And God, we met must be 12 years ago, I think, when you were heading up the safety on the regional rail link out at Footscray Sunshine, wasn't it, John?
Yes, John, that would be the first time we crossed paths, yes, mate.
Yeah, amazing. So he's led HSC teams on large multi-billion-dollar rail projects in Victoria and held national senior management roles working with safety teams. John's got an associate diploma in applied science in safety and sustainability and a master's in applied science in safety and environmental management. He's lectured in safety and risk management in university and college settings. John's also worked extensively building high-performance teams, most recently leading MTM's SERQ, so Safety, Environment, Risk and Quality team on the level crossing removal program in Melbourne. If you're not aware of that, it's just this monstrous infrastructure project to get rid of Melbourne's level crossings. John has a special interest in building safety cultures that encompass a one-team approach, contractors and PCs working together to achieve optimum outcomes. And I've got to say, I've worked with John on various projects. He's brought me in to talk to his teams, and I just love the way he goes about it. He's got a big picture perspective and a very broad, sort of open-hearted approach to leading teams and treating, all workers like, valuable human beings who should be respected and cared for. His great love is seeing team members taking both professional and personal journeys to new highs. So, John Salter, welcome to the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast.
It's great to be here and always a pleasure, John.
Yeah, so cool. It was only a few weeks ago we were working together at the new sanitation facility down there at Werribee. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
A very, very large program to change the face of technology associated with waste, that is the treatment of waste. Mm-hmm. And it's a remarkable job, very, very complex, very high risk in some areas, and a collaboration with many, many contractors. So some 200 to 250 people working on the project, John, and just remarkable what they're doing. Every time I go, I look and I'm just astounded at the progress that's being made on that project. That's going to be, it'll be a world-class technology, and I think if they get this right, they can take that technology anywhere.
Yeah, wow, amazing. And that's BMD that's running that project, isn't it?
I beg your pardon?
That's BMD that's running that project, isn't it?
Yes, they're the PC, that's right, yes.
Yeah, yep. Well, they're a great company. I'm really impressed with them.
They certainly are, and they've got a really good attitude towards organisational culture.
Yeah,
not just safety per se, but organisational culture, because we all know that just safety fits within the overall culture of the place, and they're looking at not just safety, but all culture.
Yeah,
as such.
I did a lot of work with Tim Bishop and his team over in South Australia, and I was just so impressed with them. It's just a really high level of care, and you can feel it amongst the people in the company. You know that they feel part of something, they feel cared for, and they're not just a workforce. So, I really commend companies when they can pull that off. It's good leadership.
And it takes a bit of doing. Your philosophy's got to be about just seeing people succeed, and sometimes it's about getting the job done, and you can oftentimes forget about that other bit, which is so critical. to a good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly with contractors, Tom. Particularly with contractors as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had some thoughts, leading into this podcast, that there are many male-dominated workforces in the world. The heavy industries of construction, mining, oil and gas, transport and logistics all tend to feature male-dominated workforces. Just this last week, I was amazed. My stepdaughter's partner, who's a passionate construction worker and really passionate about safety, he contacted me and he said, John, 4 men in 6 days who are members of the union took their own lives in Melbourne. Just heartbreaking, just
so sorry to hear that. That's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do, and it's incredible, It's like, and physical safety and mental well-being are a constant challenge in these industries. Safety managers across the realm are being tasked with greater and greater responsibility to ensure that all their workforce, men and women, return home safely to their families at the end of the day and at the end of their shift or the swing that they're on, So I thought that it's really cool to sort of dive in and talk about that with somebody who really knows, And you're a genuine veteran of this, and you've seen the evolution of safety in the construction industry. And, we talk about this area and how we can support men to step into greater levels of personal responsibility, care, and emotional and mental stability to reduce risk of injury, reduce mental distress, and, see if we can cut these suicides out, which would be wonderful,
Yep.
So I thought I'd start off with throwing a couple of questions up, and we can just let this play out and, see where we go with it. So, Johnny, I know you don't look it, but I believe you're 72 and you're still working and you're still fit and healthy and still, I believe you're still running, which is great. So that's my target. I've been out for a run this morning, and long as you're still running, I'll keep running. So how long have you been doing this work, and what inspired you to get into it, and why do you love it so much?
Well, I had a very interesting transition into a safety type role. I worked for Telstra for quite a long time doing, marketing and operations and customer service and Salesforce management for about 30 years. So I had lots and lots of different jobs in the organisation. And I was involved in call centre management at one stage, and the attrition rate was extremely high. So people would stick for a bit and then they'd leave. And of course, the costs associated with that are quite substantial. And one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, that was very worrying was the number of people taking sick leave. So what happened was really interesting. The union contacted me, the union that looks after those workers contacted me and said, would I go on a 6-month journey around Australia going into call centres and talking with people about why they took sick leave with a member of the union. So I did. And that was very, very interesting. In fact, it was a real eye-opener. For example, in one of the call centres, people would say, if we're coming to work and the traffic is a bit heavier than we expected, we might be a few minutes late, then it was easier to call in sick for the day than be a few minutes late.
Wow.
So you lose them for 10, 15 minutes rather, you lose them for a day instead of 10 or 15 minutes. So there are a few wellbeing issues there that really struck a chord with me, and many other issues associated with basically with mental wellbeing. And the same in any call centre, it's a tough environment. And that led me to start thinking about what we could do, obviously, to make things better. When I came back to Melbourne, they asked me if I'd be interested in taking up a safety role. Now, that really hadn't crossed my mind at all. However, after being on this journey, I thought that perhaps we can make a difference.
Wow.
But I had no quals at all, so I thought I should go and do something about that. I went off to an amazing University of Western Sydney. And I went there because a colleague of mine had gone and said, that's the place you have to be. Just incredible. It's like an old Oxford or Cambridge, just very old world, which I loved, and I had a ball. So I did my quals, and then they asked me if I'd be interested in doing some seasonal, sessional lecturing in risk management, safety risk management. So I did that and had an absolute blast. And did that for a while, and came back and took up a role in Melbourne in safety. And I absolutely love it because when you go out onto a site and you see the progress that's made from time to time, and the absolute joy in people's faces when and how proud they are to talk about what they've achieved. The Westgate Bridge Strengthening Alliance, for example, the work that was done to strengthen that bridge was incredible. And every time you did a walk, it was different. And the pride people took, and I love that. So I thought, this will do me. So I've seen that on all the projects I've worked on. People are just so proud of what they've achieved, John. I love it. Just love it.
I often think about that. I think about a construction worker working on a big project, let's just say the Westgate Bridge, and years and years later, driving their grandkids across and saying, I built this,
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
It's
like...
Absolutely. And the world of good that it's done through these projects, level crossing removal program, as an example, the Terminal 2 expansion of Melbourne Airport, a whole range of projects that, the legacy is long lasting. So, yes, they're wonderful projects to be involved in. I've been very, very lucky and almost humbled to be working with so many great people. I've had a terrific career. Long may they continue for a bit longer, John.
Yes. Yeah, you've got to keep going till you're about 85, mate.
Don't stop.
Then you can retire. Right?
Yeah,
Do you know where retirement came from? I always find this really interesting. I read this years ago because I could never sort of see myself retiring. I mean, why would I? I love my life so much. And apparently it was an economic strategy of the Third Reich to move old people out of the workplace and bring young people in to create full employment, which then created an incredibly robust economy and made the German economy extremely wealthy. And of course, we all know what they did with that wealth, right? So maybe retirement's not such a good thing,
Well, yeah, it's wonderful for probably the majority of people when they're ready, but not quite yet. Not quite yet, John.
Yeah, not for you, huh?
No, not yet.
So then it's a really interesting question for you then is, how have things changed in the industry since you've been in it? What have you really noticed? And I suppose I'm really focusing here on leadership and responsibility. I mean, the stuff that people used to do, you see the videos of the workers in New York back in the 30s, just walking across steel beams several hundred feet up in the air, to obviously a huge emphasis on safety. And I remember some years ago, I was doing a lot of work for Fulton Hogan, and they were doing work on behalf of Vic Roads. Vic Roads was the client. And they had a situation where two of the trucks that spray water on the road as they're putting the layers of bitumen down, two of the trucks backed into each other. Now, nobody was hurt, but the company chose to take everybody off the job for an entire day, bring them all into a room, bring the client into the room, and sit down and say, okay, how did that happen? Because somebody could have been hurt in that situation. And they really looked at it for the entire day to make sure that never happened again. And I just thought, oh my God, that is so responsible. Push profit out of the way. Let's take responsibility for what happened here. You would never have seen that 30 years ago.
No. The industry, in some respects, it has changed, and in others, isn't. It's a very hierarchical. Industry, particularly the construction industry. You've got your general super, and basically they run the project, so that hasn't changed, and that's been like that for as long as I've been in this particular game. What has changed clearly is the more recent focus on mental well-being. Certainly seen that, and none more evident than the other day I was at a project and at a toolbox talk, And I remember a union official came in and spoke to a workforce about someone within their company having taken their own life. And all of a sudden, everything in that room changed. These are a group of probably 50 or 60 pretty hardened people. And then I just saw them as mums and dads and sons and daughters. Everything changed. And then, the whole feeling in the room and in the union official as well, the way he spoke and how it affected him and everybody in that room, it was very somber. And so it should be. And the, people talking about it after the toolbox about what a tragic event that was. And so there's been a lot of focus on mental well-being and people more willing to talk about it. So much more to do though, John. A long way from being where, and as evidenced by, with the 4 people, so much more to be done. But I think the big part is people are starting to talk about it. Before, if you broke an arm, you'd get all the sympathy in the world, wouldn't you? Because you have your arm in a sling, or if you had a physical injury, people could relate to that.
Yeah.
Not so much when someone was struggling and their behaviour changed at work. They'd say, "Oh, mate, what are you doing? Don't do that." And they didn't really think about what was going on in their lives. I think that's changed a bit.
Yeah.
And one thing that has changed in my mind is this one, this one team approach. So I see more collaboration with contractors and PCs. I was working with John Zling on a disaster management program in Victoria, working out of Daylesford, and the contractors that were working there worked in a very collaborative manner with the PC, and oh my gosh, what a difference that made. It just demonstrated again to me that you get the right culture in the place, you can achieve almost anything, and people are happy, and they'll stick. So collaboration, absolutely critical, and certainly there's been an increase in that over the past number of years that I've certainly witnessed, John.
Yeah, probably same in a football club too, eh? Great culture, great performance.
Absolutely. Real synergies between a footy club. In fact, we got someone from a footy club on one of the projects I was working on, and good old Tommy Hafey, good old Tom. And he talked about leadership and what makes a team. That was fascinating, and the audience absolutely loved him. God bless him.
Yeah, Tommy was a great friend. He lived around the corner from me, and we used to often bump into each other out running in the mornings, and he was always out there, and we sometimes would stop and have a bit of a chat. And he just had a beautiful outlook on life. His level of care and his level of faith in human beings was quite extraordinary. And sometimes he'd ring me up, and he would ring at 9:01 in the morning, very specific.
Yeah.
And I'd answer the phone, and he would say, "It's Tommy Hafey here, and I'm sorry if I dragged you out of bed."
Yeah, Tom, I've been up since 4:00, but okay, mate, I'll take that. Yeah. Great guy.
He was a great character. And it's like, I suppose now in this podcast, I'm talking a lot about healthy masculinity and, those points for, us men, all people really, where we sort of struggle along and we work on ourselves and we finally feel like we land in a place where we've got a good account of ourselves. We feel like we've developed a pretty good moral compass, and we feel courageous enough to live by it. And, we sort of stop making those humiliating mistakes, and we start to, I suppose we become a lot wiser. I wonder if you've ever sort of contemplated your path and, where you felt like you got to that point where you could really sort of feel confident in who you are as a person.
I think part of that is about having trust that when you raise issues, that those issues will be dealt with, or you won't be seen to be a troublemaker or someone that, well, here we go again. And again, part of that overall culture about making safety personal, making it very personal and very compelling. And I think it's about the notion of mums and dads and sons and daughters that really struck a chord with me. That you've got people there that are bringing issues up, and they're not only workers, but they belong to families, and they've got more in their life than work.
Yeah,
they've got other things to go home to, and relationships to continue with. So work is, again, a means to an end.
Yeah.
And if the workplace culture is one of allowing people to raise issues and discuss matters that might have been a bit taboo, then you'll achieve incredible results. I'll give you an example. I read a book which really changed the way I thought about people, empowering people. We've all got egos, all of us. You, Johnny, I'm sure, probably a little.
Mine's a beauty.
And we need them. But I read this book about from David Marquette. He wrote a book called "Turn the Ship Around." Can I just tell this little story? It'll only take a few seconds.
Yeah, sure.
It's fascinating. It's very fascinating. So he's a commander in the US Navy, and he was in charge of a submarine. And he met all these KPIs. He's lauded as a very, very good commander. And they said, "You've done such a good job. We'll then put you in charge of a nuclear submarine." He had no experience at all. He took on the challenge. And he made some mistakes, some significant mistakes. And he said to his team, his leadership team on the submarine, again, very hierarchical, but leadership team, "Look, you knew this was the wrong decision. Why did you allow me to make these decisions?" And they said, "Well, because you're the commander, or you're the general super, or you're the foreman," for example. And he did some soul searching. He said, "God, this could have been catastrophic. I'm going to empower the people around me to make decisions. I'll let them make decisions." So he called it the freedom within a framework. So a framework of decision making within their capabilities, and they could make decisions. And it worked. It worked. He absolutely turned the performance around. So that really struck a chord with me. So when I was on the level crossing removal program, I tried it out. And I've got to say, it absolutely works. Now, you've got to let go of that ego bit and your title, and give people the confidence that when they make decisions, then you're going to support them. So I would have people come up and say, "John, can I?" And I'd say, "Let's start the conversation again." "Oh, John, I am going to la, la, la." And I said, "Look, I'm going to question you and look at your decision making. I'm not going to question your decision, but I need to understand why you made that decision. Talk to me about what you considered." And they'll do that. And these people know what they're doing. Yeah. Absolutely they do. Absolutely they do. And what I had was people come up to me and say, "What's going on with this team? These people are making a real difference. There's been a change somewhere." I smile to myself and say, yeah, it's because we're trusting people and we're allowing them to make decisions. And this became a very high-performing team. Wonderful group of very professional people. Yeah. A lot of engineers and risk people. Very professional. They made all the difference.
Yeah.
And they contributed, and they continue to contribute to a very, very good result. So let people within that framework make decisions and trust them, and you'll get extraordinary results.
So I'm interested then in what do you reckon happened for you that you made that transition where you decided that you felt safe to operate from that platform, I suppose, where you were confident to hand the decisions over to other people as opposed to staying in control of yourself, because obviously you knew what you were doing as well.
Well, there's always a better way. What I love doing, John, is going in and having a look at opportunities for improvement or better ways to do things. Yeah. And I thought this is just too hard. It's a very complex job, lots of decisions, and all the knowledge these people have got are just, look, it's as simple as going in and having a foreman say to you, can you check these JSEAs or SWIMs, these risk assessments?
Yeah.
And you'd say, well, why are you looking for me to make these? Look at this. Do you need me to? Yeah, you need to approve it. Well, you know this job back to front. Yeah, I do. You know the risks. You know the controls. You know what needs to happen. Yeah, I do. So why are you giving it to me?
Yeah.
Well, because you're the safety manager. You're the super. No, 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 no. You do it. You sign it off, and we'll do some checks along the way just to make sure things are covered off. But not every single swims or JCA.
Yeah.
Things had to change. And again, empowering others to make these decisions. It changes the way they work. It changes the outcomes. And I've got to say that people will be much happier doing their job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those changes are necessary. And I just hope that that style, that freedom within a framework approach, continues in the business that I know, construction business, because it's a world beater, absolute world beater.
Yeah. It's interesting, it's like it used to be that the older tradesmen would take the younger fellows under their wings and teach them and guide them and hopefully help them to become more responsible, as long as the kids survived the practical jokes and that sort of stuff that went on. And obviously there was situations where kids were bullied or, treated badly. But, a lot of those old tradies were honourable men and they wanted those kids to be cared for and they wanted to learn. And I wonder, how much of that you saw and where you see that playing out today, where young guys come onto a site, they've got maybe they weren't much good at school, maybe they wandered into construction, maybe all they ever wanted to do was construction. But then once they're on the site, there's, as you say, it's hierarchical, but there are older men, and of course there are women on the sites, but they tend to be predominantly men. And how the young guys treated, and do you see that there's a pathway there where they're helped to become more mature, more responsible, better young men, I suppose?
I would say that certainly exists at the moment, where you've got the older, more experienced workforce looking after the other ones that are coming in, certainly. And for a period, you need that hierarchical situation in place, because they're going to be making mistakes which they can ill afford to do.
Yeah.
So yes, I that's certainly my experience. That certainly is in play now. And there's a lot of, particularly with the engineers, a lot of young engineers coming in, very, very not experienced, but knowledgeable, and looking for ways to make improvements on the sites, and I see the older workforce listening to them, and seeing some changes. So the young workforce have got so much to offer, and there are so many young women coming in now, particularly in the engineering discipline, and they are just so clever. And it would be crazy not to listen to them. And the older guys for the most part, seem to be accepting of that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I always reckon that when I go out to the Pilbara and do talks out in the mine sites out there, and you got all these guys, and dressed in high vis, some of them big, some small, some of them hard looking, and amongst them you've got a handful of these young women in their mid-20s, tiny, still dressed in all the same gear with their hard hats and their boots, and they're working construction,
Yep.
And I just love that. It's like they're really courageous young women, who are just stepping into this all-male environment and holding their own. And I actually think that it's such a beautiful part of the chemistry, because it helps those young guys to be respectful and behave, And
Indeed.
And I want to just allude to, it was very interesting when I came out to do that talk at the project that you're running, because you remember towards the end of the talk, I was talking to the guys about strategies for getting their attention off themselves and getting their attention out into the world, and things like practicing kindness and care and being interested in other people. And there was a guy over at the side, he had a beard, and there was just something about him. I could feel him all the way through, like people sort of radiate a little bit, and I pick up on it. And there was something quite powerful about him. And I just turned to him, and just to demonstrate the interest, and I spoke directly to him. You might remember I asked him about himself and asked him if he had kids, and he just opened up, and it was this couple of minutes of this beautiful exchange, and you could feel this man how he just loves his kids, and
Yep.
and just so the humanity in him was just so beautiful. And then you told me later on that he's the most hard-ass boss in the place, and he really drives his team, and he gets incredible work out of them. And I just felt that, and I thought, wow, that's that's a guy who I reckon he probably has incredible care for his team as well, and he incredible strength of leadership. I'm just interested in those sorts of guys and your observation of him and people like him.
You're right. He drives his team, but in a very respectful way, gets things done. And I hadn't heard about his personal life, which you were able to tease out of him. Well, you didn't really tease; it just came up. It was fantastic. Look, I think there's lots we don't know about people, isn't there? So if
Mm,
you ran, and we've done this a few times at Toolbox, we'll turn to the person next to you, tell me what I don't know about you.
yeah,
And we've used it on a number of occasions from a Toolbox where things are pretty quiet, people don't provide much input to the content. But when you say that to them, the noise is invariably deafening and you learn so much. Tell me something about you that I don't know.
yeah,
And oh my God, that is so powerful. So all of a sudden, these workers are turned into mums and dads and you know, daughters and sons. They've got these interests. It's just incredible. I've had a number of people come up and say to me, I didn't know about that about you. And then, well, tell me your story.
yeah,
So I just think it's very powerful. And once you know, and that was a good demonstration you did, because once you know about people, you see them in a very different light, John.
yeah,
They're not only a worker, there's a lot more behind them.
yeah,
People are fascinating. The stories they tell, oh, you learn so much. And that contributes to the culture that we're talking about when you're building a team within
yeah,
a large construction project.
yeah. It's
It's
so
fascinating
interesting.
stuff.
I get a sense it really creates a beautiful community in the workplace. And, I've been saying to corporations for years that, people, their community used to be their street that they lived in. But then once television came and people started going inside and locking their doors and not mixing with their neighbors anymore, the workplace
Sure.
became their community. And
That's
I've always felt that anything that you can do to connect people more in the workplace so they know each other better and can see each other as fellow human beings and see each other as mums and dads or people who have got a partner or people who are single and might be a bit alone or whatever. See them for who they are so there can be more connection based on who they are as opposed to who you think they should be.
And with that connection, is spot on, John, 100%. With that connection comes care, and
Hmm.
care out on a site is all about looking after each other.
Yeah,
And I don't know that person other than the fact they work for this particular company, but now I know more about them, so my care factor goes up exponentially
yeah,
because I know they've got a couple of kids at home. I know their story about their kids and what they've been doing and what their situation is. And look, some would say, listen, I'm here to do my job and go home. I don't, and that's all. Just let me do my job and let's go home. That's okay. That's okay. But you've got to get home,
yeah,
and that care factor will help you get home.
yeah, yeah.
That's all.
Yeah,
Mm.
interesting. So another question, I'm really interested in this, area for the young blokes, and the young women who, of course, who are on the site. You know, life is very different to how it was when you and I were young.
Sure.
There was no such thing as an internet. Most people didn't know what a computer was. Telephone was something that sat on the wall at home.
Mm.
There was no cafes where people met for coffee. The local pub was it.
Mm.
And if you wanted to gamble, you actually had to go and walk into a TAB, and everybody knew you were having a punt. And if they got close enough, they could see how much you were punting. You know. To now, where there's all sorts of illicit drugs, there's mobile phones, there's dating apps, there's porn in the palm of your hand. All sorts of different drugs that are being used to basically stay awake, I suppose, stay alert. There's so many variables that young people are dealing with. And I'm wondering, you've probably seen it all. Do you feel there's I don't know, it's more challenging to help these young people sort of step into that? Because I'm really interested in that crossover point where a young person decides, okay, I'm responsible for my life here. I need to make good decisions, as opposed to just rolling along like a tumbleweed, as Harry Palmer would say, responding to temptation and circumstance,
Yeah,
as opposed to
yeah,
somebody who's really stepping in and saying, no, this is my life.
yeah,
But there's all these incredible variables that they deal with. And I mean, I don't know, I know myself. If I had all that when I was young, I know I wouldn't have done drugs because I didn't touch alcohol when I was young. But all the other stuff, I'm not sure. You know, some of it could have hooked me for sure, and I'm just
yeah.
interested. And maybe you haven't
Well,
got an answer. I don't know.
for the fairly long time I've been in this industry, I've got to say, and they've been reasonably large projects, I've rarely seen an instance through AOD testing, alcohol and other drugs testing, see any positives come up.
Mm,
Very, very few. Very few.
wow.
And maybe it's born of, look, if I get caught, then it's a first strike or something, and so I won't bother, or I'll just be very careful about what I do. But I'll just say that I've seen very few instances whatsoever. I think the world of work has got a real part to play in the way people perceive themselves and their value, such that when they leave the job, they might even, well, they'll think twice about what they do outside of work. If they're valued, if they feel valued, if they're part of a team, there's a whole range of things that contribute to how a person responds outside of work. And
Mm,
look, in this industry, there's every chance that you're going to be tested.
yeah.
So why would I put all that at risk? So there is a place for testing. There is, absolutely. But again, seen very, very little evidence. I'm sure it exists, but I've seen very little evidence of people coming up with a positive result.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't that interesting? So the
yeah, it
testing
is.
sort of creates a bit of a boundary, I suppose.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, John.
Yeah.
And long may that continue, mate. Work can give you stability where you need it
Yeah.
because there's discipline required, there's teamwork required. So the world of work can be very, very positive
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of your development as an individual and what you do outside of the work environment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, that sort of level of acceptance and inclusion and being part of a team and a community. Yeah. And working on I think also there's an element there of working on a project that has importance to the community.
Yep.
You
Oh,
know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%, John.
It's so interesting,
Mm.
isn't it? I did some work years ago with the old National Rail. It doesn't exist anymore. It sort of got carved up and sold off. But there was a site in Melbourne where they had, it was down towards the ports, where these guys, they called them terminal operators. And they used to basically, when the trains come in, they would unpin the containers so they were ready as they went under the gantries to be lifted off, etc. And it was a terrible work site. There was complete disrespect, in fact, disdain for management. There was huge amount of absenteeism. There was guys
Mm.
clocking each other on and off, and it was just a nightmare. And the a new HR manager came in, and when he saw it, he couldn't believe it, and he tried to deal with it, and he just got shunted. And he rang me and he said, I need you to come and do something for me down here. And he said, I want you to run some men's health programs, but this is what I want to get out of it. He said, I need to shift this culture. And
Yep.
so it was really interesting. Like the men's health programs I deliver are pretty interesting, and guys get very engaged because they're learning things perhaps they didn't know. And my approach, as you know, is not to tell people how to live their life, but to educate them about things so they can make their own decisions.
Mm.
And I was talking about community, and there was one guy in the room I knew from day one. He was a big guy. I knew he was the power center in the place. Yeah. And he was the one who was condoning all of this sort of stuff. And I think management were a bit frightened of him. And he's a big guy, and he just had that sort of power about him. And there was a moment there where we were talking about community and being out in the community and local football clubs, junior football. What do you do in the community? Where do you make a contribution? And this guy opened up. And do you know what he used to do on a Sunday? He'd get a van and he would drive around and pick up all those kids who would never make it to the football game if nobody picked them up. And he made sure they had gear, and he took them to the football game and they got to play. And then he made sure they all got home that night. And his humanity spilled out onto the table, and the rest of the guys in the room, while he's telling the story, Johnny, they stopped breathing. It was the most profound moment. And you know what? That shifted the entire culture in that workplace. The absenteeism dropped by something like 92%. They stopped breaking the rules. They became a functional workforce, you know? And it was, you just never know how it's going to happen, but this guy actually revealed himself. Instead of being some sort of hard-assed identity at work, he actually revealed himself. And I'm sure you've seen that happen in workplaces, you know, where people actually stop being a bloody robot and just reveal their humanity to everybody.
Yeah. And the thing is, of course, if they're willing to share that side of themselves, it encourages others to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so you build that very positive culture, which is about, we have a life outside of work. This is my life. I'm sharing it with you. But not only that, I'm very interested in what happens outside of work with you as well, and genuinely interested.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, things will change if change is required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I've got one other thought for you, John, and I've been talking to my beautiful partner, Larson, about this. And I was having a conversation with a consulting firm a couple of days ago about this as well. And there are people in the world who are very sensitive. They feel stuff, you know, they're intuitive, and maybe they're even a little bit psychic. They pick stuff up. And they can be male, they can be female. And they are the people who can tend to get a little bit overwhelmed when there's a lot of angst going on around them. But I also think that they can be the canary in the coal mine. And I'm wondering what you think, and this is just, I'm not expecting again a really sort of a authoritative answer from you, but I just want to put it out for contemplation. What would happen if, like construction companies, for example, identified those people and said to them, if ever you're on the job and you feel something that's off, let us know, and we'll honor what you tell us. Because oftentimes they'll pick something up before it happens. And there'll be just there'll be a shift in the ether around the project. There'll be something that they'll feel, and it creates a new element or a new realm for safety that maybe we haven't explored yet.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Those people certainly exist. And again, that's clearly about the culture that exists on the project, not a safety culture.
Yeah.
The culture about, so they've got a start of day meeting, and they're discussing what they're going to be doing for the day. And this person, not necessarily associated with the safety matter, is looking at what about this, what about that, and the acceptance from the group about what they're saying. So it's about how the group accepts the person that rarely speaks up, but when they do, and you would have seen that, John, in the footy clubs, when they speak up, all of a sudden the room goes quiet, and they're very respected, because typically they say very little, but when they do say something, it can make quite a difference. So Yeah, it's all about, isn't it? It's about the culture that you've got within the organisation to allow that to occur, and how they're treated, the respect they're treated with once they do talk. They put their hand up and say, "I've got something to say." Um, I've witnessed a bit of that over the years, and I've got to say that long may people step up and say, "Look, I've got something to say."
Yeah. Well, I think also it's like I did a job a few years ago for AFL Sports Ready. They're sort of an RTO that does a lot of training in the sports disciplines, careers in sport. And
Mm,
I was absolutely thrilled to meet Gary Eller. He's one of the three Eller brothers that were part of that extraordinary Wallabies team from the late 80s. The three
mm,
Indigenous Australian brothers, and Mark Eller was the captain, and they won the Grand Slam when they toured the UK. And those guys, when they threw the ball around, especially those brothers, one of them would pass the ball blindly and it would land in his other brother's arms because somehow they just knew they were there.
yeah.
And we often see it amongst the Indigenous players in the AFL, how they just sort of pop up where the ball is, and you think, how did he know? And I think it's a quality of our Indigenous people in this country that they have got that sensitivity because they tend to live with their attention out in the world. And I wonder whether there's a pathway there for us to embrace that beautiful quality of our Indigenous population, to bring them into the workforce and say, hey, what we want you to do here is work, but we want you to tell us what you feel. Just
Mm,
keep us
mm,
posted with what you're picking up around the place.
mm.
I don't know, maybe I'm a bit crazy, but I just feel that this is an area we could do a lot.
No, look, totally agree with you, John. They've got so much to offer, so
Uh,
much to offer.
yeah,
We just got to provide that opportunity. We're seeing more and more Indigenous people on projects now, which is wonderful.
yeah,
And oftentimes they don't say much, but again, when they do, it's very insightful.
yeah,
So I'd certainly
yeah,
welcome that.
very much
Yeah.
so.
I've just been remembering something that happened to me, John, if I
Yeah,
may, because I love stories, because you're the greatest storyteller of all time. I love the stories. And long may you do that, because you've got so many that are very interesting. I just, um, I was involved in a basketball with a basketball team. It was a Victorian country under 16 girls team. So these are 14, 15-year-old girls.
yep,
We went away to Launceston to Australian Championship, and we played a team that we expected to beat. Now, we got beaten. So we went back to the hotel, and as we typically do, we said, look, time for a debrief. What do we need to do? And they just said, John, can you leave us? We'll work through this ourselves. These are young ladies, young girls. So we did. And we came back to the room, and I'll never forget what we saw, which was a candle. Where they got from, I don't know. They were sitting in a circle. The candle was in the middle. There were tissues everywhere, so they clearly burned some emotion. And I said to them, so do we need to do the debrief? And they said, no, we've got it worked out. We've got it worked out. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we spoke to each other about how we feel about them as players, and what we didn't do on the court. And we just opened our hearts, and we just talked about what we should have done and what we need to do next time. And they solved it. They solved all this. So the next game, invariable, happened, and we played, I think it was New South Wales Metro, and we beat them. And again, for me, it was a reminder that, hang on, we don't have all the answers.
yeah,
I think these are kids, 13, 14, 15-year-old, who came up, they knew what they had to do if they were given the opportunity to be able to talk to it without the manager, so to speak, in play. And they came up with it, So look, let's empower people, whether it's within that freedom, within a framework or other means. Let them take ownership. And I didn't learn that for a very long time, but oh my God, I swear by it now.
yeah, yeah. Wow, what a great story. And my mind just jumps in. I wonder what those young ladies are doing now.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So cool. That's really sweet. All righty. So, question that I've been asking in this podcast: who is a man that you looked up to when you were growing up that you may have learned some things from, or maybe you modelled yourself on, and what was it about that man?
Okay. All right. It would have to be a very good mate of mine who's no longer around. Unfortunately, he's moved on to another sphere. He was a guy who did what he said he was going to do.
Mhm.
For example, we lived in Wyndham, and he had a long driveway up to his home, and he said, "John, I'm going to reverse my car every day for a year. Whenever I come home, I'm going to reverse my car up this windy and somewhat difficult driveway." And I said to him, "Frank, what's the story, mate?" He said, "Because I said I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do it." And that was his life. Whatever he said he was going to do, he did.
Right.
He had a fairly major operation, and he said to the surgeon, "I'm going to swim in the Pier to Porty pub swim." And the surgeon said, "This is not going to happen. Those days are finished," because he did it every year. "Those days are finished. You'll never do it again." Well, he said, "No, I'm going to do it." And he actually did it. And the surgeon was absolutely astounded and said, "Oh my gosh, how on earth did you do that?" And he said, "Because I said I was going to do it."
Right.
And he said, "You shouldn't have been able to finish." And he finished, and he did okay. So really, yeah, I took a lot from that. You know, if you say you're going to do something, actually you really bloody will do it. Just get it done. Just get it done. Get it done.
I think I
And that
could
was
take a leaf out of Frank's book, Johnny.
Well, we all could, I think, but I've just, no time for procrastination. Just get it done.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So,
Well, another thing is that I like to just bring up something about sport. It was Super Bowl time in the US, and of course I missed it because I'm in Romania at the moment, and I couldn't watch it, and I normally do watch it, but I was listening to Jared Waitley on the radio, and he said that it was only a few years back that the NFL would not allow any advertising from anything in Las Vegas in case the advertisement implied anything about gaming. Now, in a short time, sports gambling sponsorship is taking over sport. It's the predominant sponsorships, predominant advertising in sport, and I've never liked it. Gambling has changed so much. It's gone from the obvious, with limitations like, you have to have cash in your pocket, you have to walk into the TAB, to where it's completely covert. And as I say, when I'm giving seminars, half of you blokes could have placed a bet while I'm talking to you and nobody would know.
yeah, quite
And,
so.
I'm really concerned about that with sport, because I've been led to believe that now we've even got 14-year-old girls who are addicted to gambling because of the gambling apps. And it's a big concern. That's my
Wow.
thought this week from sport.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's, when we did bring Tommy Hafey out, as I indicated earlier, he talked about children and sport. And he said, "I visit correctional centres, youth detention or youth correctional centres." And he said 90% of the people, the young kids in there, had never played sport.
Wow.
90% of the kids that were there have never played sport.
Wow.
He said, if you want to make them responsible young adults and live good lives, get them into sport.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to do more of that.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying for a long time, and I say it to the guys, when I come into the workplaces, if you want to be involved in some sort of community service, get down to the local footy club and help out. Do something.
Yeah.
Just do something, even if it means you go and watch the game on Saturday and put $20 across the bar. That's contributing, and be part of it, so that we open up these opportunities and then and really create this possibility for kids to participate in sport.
Yeah, and be part of a tribe, a positive tribe, a good tribe.
Yeah.
Be part of a good tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say to them, when you're around the clubs, you can make sure other people are behaving, and being appropriate in the way they deal with things. Okay, so almost to the end here. So, thought for a week. I read this off off the internet. The author of it was someone named Seneca. And it said, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself.
Mm.
I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Wow. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Johnny, what's next for you?
Well, you talk about slowing down and doing other things, and that's great. I think the problem with going into that semi-retirement or retirement, whatever you want to call it, is that you've got all this knowledge and all this experience, and you're going to park it and then go and play the golf or whatever you like to do, and that's fantastic. But for me, I think mentoring, John. I think I'm just going to try and really get into a mentoring role now, with some more capacity, and do some mentoring, because got lots of stories, as you have, and it'd be a shame just to park all that knowledge and experience. So look out. I'll be around for a bit longer.
Wow.
I hope so anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we go back to the footy clubs. It's like, how many people who are incredibly smart, who are incredibly wise and got so much experience, are sitting there in the suburbs somewhere. If somebody went and knocked on the door and said, would you like to come down to the local cricket club, sir? We'd love to draw on your wisdom, or it doesn't have to be male. It can be, women as well. Like, come and give us some advice. Come and guide us. It's like
people like to be asked for help, John. There's no doubt about it. People are sometimes reticent to ask someone, but it's real. People like to be asked for help.
Yeah,
and normally they'll respond very well.
Absolutely. Well, Johnny, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and thank you so much for everything you've done and everything you contributed, and all the times that you've invited me out to be part of your projects, and been very, very cool. And as I leave at the end of the podcast, each session, thing I call to everybody is to just be the man you needed when you were a kid, and you were either in trouble or you were frightened.
Yeah.
So thanks again, Johnny, and we'll catch up soon.
Always a pleasure, mate. Always a pleasure.
Good on you, mate. Thanks everybody for tuning in.